Why does a monopolist make profit? Well, the monopolist makes profit because of lack of entry, because of lack of competition. Right? One of the reasons why a monopolist makes money, of course, he has to still be, cost conditions, everything is important, but if you think in contrast to perfect competition, it's the lack of entry which allows him to make profits. Because in the long run, if this had been a competitive market, new firms would have come in and sort of wiped out all his profits, right? Typically what we say is that there are various factors of production, and we talk, say, usually land, labor, capital and entrepreneurship, right? These are typically things which go into producing anything, land, labor, capital, and you need somebody to put everything together and make something out of all this. What does labor get out of all of this? Wages. So, you get wages. What does capital get? Interest. What does entrepreneur get? Profit. And what does land get? Rent. So, what is so characteristic about land? Largely land is fixed in supply. Where does the income from land come from? Land is inelastic in supply, you have just said, right. So, the supply curve for land looks like this, right, and suppose you have a demand for land. So, this is the price of land, and then how much money does this person earn? So, this is Q 0, say P 0. So, this whole amount is going to, or minus the costs, is going to the whoever owns the land. What can this person do, whoever owns land, or say combined, not in terms of, if land is in fixed supply, then this person or the combination of persons who together hold land, they cannot actually change the supply of land, because it is inelastic in supply. So, consequently, the opportunity cost of land is 0. Another way of thinking about it is the income that accrues to fixed factors is called rent. A lot of the incomes that various people earn is actually, because it is inelastic in supply, it's actually should be called rent rather than profit or anything else. So, for example, a famous cricketer, what about his earnings? What would he have done had he not played cricket? Tennis. So, if he tried being a tennis player, and you are saying that he was probably not going to be a very successful tennis player, then whatever his earnings are as a tennis player, right. So, you can compare his earnings as a cricketer versus his next best alternative, which in this case you are saying as a tennis player. So, the amount that he is earning, right, over and above that you would have earned as a tennis player is rent. The reason why it is rent is because the supply of Tendulkars is inelastic, right. The supply is inelastic. So, consequently, whatever he earns over and above his opportunity cost should really be termed rent. So, the idea is that anything which is fixed in supply, the income that accrues to anything which is not elastic or not is completely inelastic supply is rent. So, monopoly profit should also be called monopoly rent. It is not really profit. The profit you are earning is because the supply of firms is inelastic. You are not allowing new firms to come in. The next step is people argue, so this is the deadweight loss. So, I say okay, fine, but there is profit as well, right. The profit is given by this part. So, the profit accrues or the profit happens typically because the government does not allow entry. There are barriers to entry, and typically it is the government is the source of monopoly rents. So, then how much would the monopolist be willing to spend to go and get this particular right? Suppose it has to go and tell currently Narendra Modi, please do not let anybody else come in, because that way I will make money. And Narendra Modi says, okay, you have to pay me for that. So, how much would the monopolist be willing to spend? At most this profit. So, then people argue that the loss duty of monopolist is actually even more than the deadweight loss, because a lot of the loss is the monopolist's attempt to try and get monopoly status. And so, consequently, the monopolist will spend up to all of its profit, up to the normal profit, economic profit, to try and get this particular advantage. So, people argue that the loss due to monopolization is not merely the deadweight loss, but also beyond that the profit is also a loss, because this is just money spent on unproductive spending. You go and take them out for dinner and give them a good time, so that they give you the monopoly status.